Maison Margiela, the man who wasn't there. Welcome to the Fashion Code, where we don't just talk about designers. We unravel the mysteries behind the labels. And today we're opening the door to one of fashion's most secretive, whispered about, white lab-coated brands, Maison Margiela. This isn't just a brand. It's a ghost story stitched into clothing. A name that hides its creator. A label that famously doesn't have a label. Or rather, it has a label with no name. Just 4 tiny white stitches like a secret handshake only fashion nerds understand. But who or what is Maison Margiela? To understand, we need to enter a world where the designer refuses to take a bow. Where models wear masks. Where the garments are more like whispered poetry than product. Welcome to the cult of Margiela. Our story begins quietly, of course, in Belgium. In 1957, a boy named Martin Margiela was born in a small town near Genk. From the beginning, he was fascinated by form, how things are made, taken apart, and remade again. He studied at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp, a place known for producing rebels, rule breakers, and revolutionaries. By the 1980s, fashion was loud, flashy, maximalist. Big logos, big hair, bigger egos. And into that chaos walked Margiela. Silent, thoughtful, surgical. He didn't want to be seen. He wanted the work to speak. When he launched his own label in 1988, Maison Margiela wasn't like anything else on the runway. Models wore veils. Garments were deconstructed, literally taken apart and rebuilt. Seams were exposed on purpose. Heels were split like hooves. Yes, the infamous tabi boots. Inspired by traditional Japanese socks, the tabi divided the big toe from the others. To some, they were ugly. To others, iconic. To everyone, unforgettable. And maybe that's the point. Margiela's clothes weren't about beauty. They were about truth. Truth in construction. Truth in materials. Truth in imperfection. He once said, anonymity is the shield against the ego. He refused interviews. Never took a bow. Let his team speak for him. Margiela didn't just challenge fashion norms, he ghosted them. And fashion? It wasn't sure whether to be confused or obsessed. Let's talk about the moment when fashion realized Margiela wasn't just different, he was dangerous. In 1989, his second runway show was staged not in a fancy Parisian venue, but in an abandoned kids' playground in a rough part of town. The audience sat on broken chairs. Local kids ran around the models mid-show. The lighting? Pure DIY chaos. It was called the Salvation Army Show, and it was unlike anything the industry had seen. Some critics were horrified. Others called it genius. Because it wasn't just rebellion. It was a thesis. Fashion didn't have to be polished. It could be raw, honest, even uncomfortable. The clothes told the same story. Vintage garments were reworked into new pieces. A leather glove became a top. Old military jackets were recut into couture. Labels were left visible. Sometimes the original garment was left intact, just flipped inside out. Why? Because to Margiela, every garment had a past and it deserved to be seen. He called it replica, a celebration of imperfection, memory, and craftsmanship. But even as the shows got more legendary, Margiela stayed in the shadows. Press requests? Ignored. Photos? Rare. Even his team wore white lab coats, becoming part of the mystery. It wasn't a brand. It was a philosophy. Fashion insiders called him the Banksy of couture. But even that felt too loud for Margiela. His work asked questions. What is luxury? Why do we hide the seams? Can fashion exist without fame? By the mid-90s, Maison Margiela was no longer underground, it was a cult. Fashion schools studied his shows like sacred texts. Designers whispered his name like legend. But Martin? He never stepped forward. He never chased fame. And slowly, the mystery grew. Until 2002, when the brand was bought by Diesel Group. And then something shifted. He stayed on as creative director for a while. But the world got louder. Fashion got faster. And Margiela? He began to disappear. By 2009, he was gone. No farewell show. No final collection. No Instagram post. Just silence. The ghost had ghosted. So what happens when the ghost leaves the house? Maison Margiela without Martin felt like a haunted mansion with no haunting. It still had the bones, the echoes. But would it still feel alive? For years, the brand coasted in a strange limbo. Quiet collections, loyal fans, and an eerie respect for the silence he left behind. Then, in 2014, a name was whispered. A name no one expected. John Galliano. Yes, that John Galliano. The man who once turned Dior runways into operas. A designer known for drama, color, flamboyance, the complete opposite of Margiela's masked quiet. People were shocked. Some were furious. How could the loudest man in fashion lead the most silent brand? But Galliano, to his credit, didn't try to erase the ghost. He spoke about Margiela with reverence, even obsession. And then something wild happened. It worked. Galliano didn't copy Margiela. He channeled him. He brought his own theatrical energy but filtered it through the Margiela lens. Suddenly, shows became eerie again. Models wore masks. Clothes were layered, distorted, repurposed. He honored the replica series. He even kept the white lab coats for the team. But now there were new elements. Digital distortion, haunting makeup, clothing that looked like it survived a post-apocalyptic opera. Galliano understood that Margiela wasn't about being quiet. He was about being intentional. And in that sense, their spirits aligned. In a world obsessed with self-promotion, selfies, and spotlights, Margiela stood for erasure. And Galliano learned to whisper in a world that shouts. Margiela became relevant again. But not through noise. Through mystery. Through meaning. Now the brand straddles two worlds. One foot in the archives. One foot in the future. It still asks the same questions. What is identity? What is beauty? Do you need to be seen, to be heard? Let's talk about a shoe that split the fashion world in half literally. The Tabi boot? Split toe. Hoof-like. Weird? Yes. Iconic? Absolutely. Tabi's first walked Margiela's runway in 1989 and instantly confused everyone. Some called them grotesque. Others called them genius. But no one ignored them. And that's the power of a symbol. Over the years, Tabi boots have become a secret language. If you know, you know. You see someone wearing Tabis on the street? You don't think, nice shoes. You think, oh, they read the fashion scriptures. They've become the unofficial badge of Margiela disciples. But it gets even weirder. Tabis are now so coveted. There's an entire black market of fakes and resellers. There are TikToks about people getting their Tabis stolen, not joking. One girl even got hers pickpocketed at a club. Who steals a shoe with two toes? A fashion thief. That's who. There's something deeper here. Because Tabis aren't just a flex, they're a filter. Most fashion statements say, look at me. Tabis say, figure me out. They challenge the idea that beautiful things must be easy. They turn discomfort into conversation. And that is pure Margiela. Even the marketing today feels ghost-written. Campaigns show distorted reflections, blurred faces, empty rooms. You don't see celebrities. You see shadows. And that somehow sells out. In a world that constantly shouts, Margiela whispers. And the whisper echoes louder than you'd expect. Now, let's step back. What makes this brand so powerful? It's not hype, not logos, not even the clothes. It's the feeling. Margiela is mystery you can wear. A challenge stitched into cotton. It's fashion that asks questions not just about style, but about self. What are we hiding when we dress up? What are we revealing when we choose silence? Maison Margiela might be the only brand that makes you feel like a character in a film no one's seen, but everyone quotes. And maybe that's the point, okay? Let's get real for a second. Margiela might be mysterious. But somehow it's everywhere. Tabi unboxings on TikTok. Margiela dupes on Amazon. Your favorite rapper name-dropping it in a song even if they don't pronounce it right. And yet, the brand hasn't lost its soul. How? Because Margiela isn't chasing the algorithm. It's haunting it. While other brands go viral with big celebrity stunts, Margiela drops a lookbook that looks like surveillance footage from a dream. And still, it sells out. It's a glitch in the fashion system. A brand that survives by being unsolvable. And maybe that's why it works. Because in a world that tracks everything, Margiela leaves no footprints, only shadows. It invites you to question, to interpret, to feel. It's a puzzle. A poem. A dare. So if you made it this far into the video, maybe you're one of the curious ones, the opera, the flashlights, and the devil. Alright, you want more Margiela magic? Let's go deeper. Here's something you might not know. Maison Margiela started out as an assistant to Jean-Paul Gaultier. Yes, the same Gaultier who put Madonna in that iconic cone bra. And even back then, Martin kept to the shadows. Gaultier once joked that Martin was so discreet he was almost invisible. And that's not just a personality trait, it became the blueprint for a brand. But let's talk about something even wilder. In 1997, Maison Margiela was asked to design costumes for the opera Faust. Not just any opera, one that's literally about making a deal with the devil. Margiela said yes. And instead of traditional costumes, he used old clothing from the flea market, reworked, torn, faded. The result? It looked like the cast had climbed out of purgatory. Critics were shocked. The audience? Confused. Fashion nerds? Obsessed. And that sums up Margiela's vibe pretty well. Here's another gem. At one show, guests were handed flashlights instead of programs. Why? Because the venue was pitch black. You had to light the models yourself as they walked by. It wasn't just spooky, it was genius. Because in a world where fashion is hyperlit, Margiela made you look for the beauty. Let's jump to collectors for a moment. Did you know Margiela pieces have their own underground archive scene? There are literal forums where people trade 90s Margiela like rare Pokemon cards. Tabi boots from certain years go for more than rent. A reconstructed coat from 1992? Museum-worthy. And speaking of museums, the brand's pieces have been displayed in MoMA, Palais Galliera, and even in concept art shows that blur the line between clothing and sculpture. Margiela isn't just worn. It's studied. And now, with Galliano at the helm, some of the vintage pieces are getting reissued as homages, almost like fashion ghost stories retold with new fabrics. But no matter how far the brand goes, that original energy, that mystery, still lingers. It's like Margiela never really left. He just became the walls. And maybe that's what makes it all work. Because in an age where every designer wants to be a celebrity, Margiela reminds us that sometimes the loudest voice says nothing at all. Alright, one last story, and it's a weird one. In the early 2000s, Margiela created a coat made entirely from old wigs. Yes, wigs. Human hair, sewn together, draped like fur, but with this surreal, slightly creepy twist. It was called the hair coat. Some thought it was grotesque. Others thought it was genius. It blurred the line between fashion, identity, and disguise. Because what is a wig, really? It's performance. It's transformation. It's hiding and revealing all at once. Just like Margiela's entire philosophy. But here's the wild part. When the coat hit the runway, some people didn't even realize it was hair at first. They just saw this rich, flowing texture and then did a double take. It was part horror movie, part high fashion. And that reaction? That gasp, that discomfort, it was intentional. Margiela once said that clothing should raise awareness, not just admiration. The hair coat did exactly that. It made you ask, why are we okay with fur but weirded out by hair? Why do we wear what we wear? Who decides what's beautiful? That coat has since become one of the brand's most iconic and divisive pieces. It shows up in museum retrospectives, fashion textbooks, and even haunted a few Tumblr feeds back in the day. Because you never forget the moment you realize you're looking at a model wearing 200 wigs. Margiela didn't design clothes to be liked. He designed them to be remembered. And this one? Oh, you remember it. Let's rewind to another strange Margiela moment, the invisible dress. In one of his early collections, Margiela sent a model down the runway wearing basically nothing. It was a sheer, transparent dress made of polyurethane, a material usually used for industrial packaging. To the untrained eye, it looked like the model was just glowing. But up close, the dress was there perfectly constructed, meticulously tailored, and completely invisible under certain light. Fashion critics didn't know what to say. Was it anti-fashion? Was it a prank? Was it brilliance? Probably all three. Because while most designers used fabric to cover, Margiela used fabric to reveal. Or, in this case, to suggest. It wasn't just about being provocative. It was about showing the blueprint of fashion, seams, structure, the body beneath. And like so much of Margiela's work, it challenged what we thought fashion was supposed to do. Clothes usually speak loudly. His whispered. Another time, he created a top out of broken porcelain plates, yes, actual ceramic shards. It clinked as the model walked, like a walking ghost from a shattered tea party. Dangerous? Maybe. But poetic? Definitely. That was Margiela's genius. He could take trash and make it sacred. He could turn silence into a statement. His work wasn't always wearable, but it was unforgettable. And in fashion, that's the real power. Maybe you don't just want fashion. You want story, mystery, meaning. And that's what we do here. At the Fashion Code, we don't just decode clothes. We uncover cults, rebels, and runways that whisper instead of scream. If this episode left you thinking, or Googling, can I actually pull off toppies? Hit that like button. And if you want more strange, stylish, secretly genius fashion stories, you know what to do. Subscribe. Because this was just the beginning. And Margiela? It never really ended. It just walked away.